There's something really fragile between the barbell and the floor when you're back squatting. And that really fragile thing between the barbell and the floor is you. Anyway, and to be frankly honest, I'm not doing a lot of squatting these days. I'm only allowed to go to like 40 degrees of squatting, which is that quarter squat. We don't need to show anybody the knee. Funnier later. So I'm supposed to discuss back squatting versus front squatting is what I'm told by the boss. Is that correct, boss?
Mm-hmm.
She's nodding her head yes, but she probably can't hear. It's an open-ended question. Front squatting versus back squatting. Why you should front squat versus back squat. Why should you back squat versus front squat. Pros and cons of each. If there are any cons, which there are a few, I suppose. Essentially, there are only three kinds of squats. There's a front squat, an overhead squat, and a back squat. And those three types of squats are subject to where the load is placed on your specific frame. You could get into knee dominant versus hip dominant. You can get into unilateral versus bilateral, one leg versus two legs, so on and so forth. But generally speaking, there's only three places that you can hold weight. You can either hold the weight in front of your body, you can hold weight above your body, which would be an overhead squat, and you can hold weight behind your body on your back, which would be a back squat. Now, generally speaking, a front squat is going to be and should be your first learned squat position, mainly because it teaches proper squatting mechanics. We didn't learn to squat poorly. We all learned to squat very, very well. It's really, really rare that I see a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old who squats like crap, even though they might have their diaper filled with poo. Most of the time, their squat form is actually quite exquisite. Usually it takes us getting older and our growth spurts to make our squatting form look like crap and to be actually terrible, where we lean too far forward, our heels come up off the ground, because we have this misconception of what a squat really and truly is. We think that we're supposed to like somehow travel straight down, much like an accordion, but really it's a movement of shifting back and forth via the hips and knees and the thoracic spine. But when you do a front squat, which should be the first squat that you should learn post body weight. If you can't squat to depth with just your body weight, there's no reason in holding on to anything heavy. First, you must be able to squat your own mass. After you can squat your own mass to proper depth, which we can debate on in the comments, I suppose. What is proper depth for squatting? If you're like some people, proper depth is just about a quarter of the way off the top. So just bend the knees slightly, stand back up. That's how most people are gonna think of their squat. That's not how we do it here, personally, but if you go to most gyms, you're gonna see them in that nice upper squat range, I think. But we tend to think more of a depth. There are some exceptions to these particular rules. But, however, before we would start our front squat, we'd wanna make sure we can squat to depth with just our weight. Let's say you weighed 400 pounds. If you can squat to depth with just your body weight, you did a 400-pound squat. That's still damn impressive and extremely difficult to do. There's no point in adding weight to somebody that's already heavy enough. But once you got there and you can squat, say your body weight more than about 16 times, we'd want to start adding weight. A lot of people jump right into the barbell realm. They throw that barbell on their back and they go, okay, I'm going to squat with this on my back. But I usually prefer that we start with a front squat. Front squatting tends to teach proper hip mechanics and proper form significantly better than a back squat would. Specifically, since that all that weight is in front of your body, your hinge pushes back, which makes you have a more erect thoracic extension. If you lean forward at all in that front squat, the weight just pulls you over. It's really hard to maintain. So by front squatting, you're actually teaching yourself better mechanics before doing a back squat later. Those who can front squat really, really well can also back squat really, really well. But people who only back squat can rarely transition into what a front squat would need to be. Now you're gonna have less overall load in your front squat than you are your back squat. Those who back squat typically back squat more load than those who front squat. But if your front squat is practiced often enough, you'll find that it's significantly, I find it more comfortable personally. I like the load on my shoulders, on my front delts, more so than I like it on my back. and I'm not really that prideful in regards to loads on most of my lifts anyway. To be frank, one of the big downsides of back squat has to do with the nature and the spottage of what a back squat is. Ideally, you should never need a spotter. A spotter is there as a safety mechanism, as a safety assurance, so that nothing bad happens. But generally speaking, you would want to start with your front squat, and then once you perfected that, you would add into your back squat later. And you should alternate back and forth. Depends on your sets and rep schemes, depends on your micro and macro program design, depends on all that stuff when you do switch and how often you should or shouldn't. But generally speaking, a front squat is going to be significantly better in most capacities than a back squat.